Hello, my name is Bella. I am a widow. I always thought the worst day of my life had come and gone. It wasn't when Gregory died, though that day carved out a part of me I've never gotten back. We were married for 38 years. He was my best friend, my sounding board, my quiet cheerleader. Cancer took him in under 9 months. I was still working as a nurse in the oncology ward when his diagnosis came in. The irony nearly choked me. I'd spent decades comforting families in those white rooms filled with antiseptic and grief, and suddenly I was the one standing there with the chart trembling in my hands, knowing exactly what it meant. But even that day, for all its anguish, was not the worst. No, the worst came 12 years later on a forgettable Tuesday afternoon. The kind of Tuesday where the sky is just gray enough to make you tired and the house is too quiet. I was folding laundry in the living room, nothing special, just some of the worn towels Gregory and I bought during a Sears clearance sale back in '91, the kind I couldn't bear to throw out because he used to wrap me in them after long baths. The TV murmured something inane about celebrity divorces, and I was only half listening when my phone buzzed on the coffee table. Harold, my only child. My heart did what it always does when I see his name, a little leap, a little ache. He rarely calls. Texts sometimes, usually when he needs something or when he's feeling guilty enough to remember I exist. I picked up the phone quickly, hoping for warmth, for the sound of my son saying, "Hi, Mom," in that sheepish voice he used when he was 10 and broke the neighbor's window. "Hi, darling," I said, folding the last towel. "Everything all right?" A pause. Too long. Then, in a voice that didn't sound like my son, too flat, too detached, he said, "Mom, I wanted to talk to you about Sophie's wedding." I smiled reflexively, though he couldn't see it. "Yes, of course. Do you need help with anything?" "I've been saving for a little something special for her gift." "No," he interrupted. "Actually, that's not why I'm calling." Something in the tone made my heart freeze. My fingers curled around the edge of the towel. "We've decided," he began again, "that you're not going to be invited." I thought I misheard. "I what?" He sighed, and I could hear the whisper of someone else in the room with him. A man's voice. "Klaus, probably. We've talked about it a lot," he said. "Me, Sophie, Klaus, his parents, and we all feel it's better this way." I sat down slowly on the edge of the sofa, the towel slipping to the floor. "I'm not invited?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "There's been tension over the years," he said, as if this were some HR matter, not the brutal exclusion of a grandmother from her only granddaughter's wedding. "You and Sophie have had your disagreements. You know she's sensitive. And Klaus's family, they're very traditional. They think it might be uncomfortable having conflict present." I tried to find the words. Any words. "She's my granddaughter," I said finally. "I held her the day she was born. I helped raise her. I stayed up nights with her when she had night terrors. I paid for half her private school. How can I be uncomfortable at her wedding?" "It's not personal," Harold said. "It's just complicated." "Not personal?" I repeated, incredulous. "Harold, this is as personal as it gets." Again, that murmur in the background. Klaus, no doubt coaching him like a PR rep spinning bad press. "I don't want to fight, Mom," Harold said. "This wasn't easy for any of us." "Oh, don't flatter yourself," I snapped before I could stop myself. I'm sure it was very hard to cross my name off the guest list. Was it before or after dessert? Silence. "I'm sorry," he said eventually, without meaning it. I didn't cry. Not while he was still on the phone. That much pride I still had. "Well," I said, my voice trembling. "Thank you for calling. I won't keep you." "Mom," he started, but I hung up. The phone dropped onto the couch beside me like a dead thing. I stared at the carpet for a long time. The television still blared, but I didn't hear it. The house was quiet, so quiet I could hear the tick of the kitchen clock, the creak of the old pipes, the ghosts of memories rattling through the walls. I remembered Sophie's 5th birthday. She wanted a Cinderella party. I sewed that blue gown myself after my shift at the hospital, pricking my fingers raw, because she wanted it, just like the movie. I remembered Harold's divorce, when he came to stay with me for 6 weeks and drank too much and cried on my porch, and I never once told him he'd brought it on himself. I remembered the little Thanksgiving where no one came, so I made pumpkin soup and ate it alone, telling myself they were just busy. But this wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't distance. This was a deliberate erasure. A statement. I am no longer considered family. And yet I didn't cry. Not that day. Something inside me, something long buried under years of self-sacrifice and silence, stirred. 10 days later, I had a plan. They thought I would shrink, but I was preparing something they never expected, a surprise that would make them remember exactly who I was. And this time, I wouldn't be folding towels and waiting for a phone call. I didn't sleep the night after the phone call. I sat in Gregory's old recliner, the one by the window where the early light of morning always struck first, and I watched the dark shift into dawn without closing my eyes. My heart wasn't racing. It wasn't even breaking anymore. It was just quiet, and in that awful, unfamiliar quiet, my mind wandered backward. Like a film reel skipping in time, it landed on moments I had shelved in memory, stored away under labels like Sophie's childhood and days when love was easy. Sophie at age 5, crawling into my lap with her favorite book and curling her tiny fingers around mine. Sophie at 10, proudly presenting a Mother's Day card she made for me with macaroni glued in the shape of a heart. To Grandma Bella, who is better than 10 moms, she had scrawled in thick purple marker. But the clearest memory, the one I kept replaying like a prayer, was the summer she was 11. That was the summer she fell in love with the Mustang. It was a scorching July afternoon. Sophie had been spending a week with me while Harold and Melissa, his second wife, the one who always looked at me like I was made of smudged glass, went on a marriage reboot trip to Cabo. Gregory was still alive then, a little thinner, his voice a touch raspier, but still able to hoist Sophie onto his shoulders like she weighed nothing. She'd been chasing butterflies in the yard when she wandered into the garage. The Mustang sat beneath a dusty tarp in the back corner like a forgotten relic of another life. A 1968 convertible, cherry red, black leather seats. Gregory had bought it for a pittance in the late 90s, a project he never quite had time for but always dreamed of finishing. He wanted to fix it with Harold, bond over carburetors and engine grease, the way fathers and sons are supposed to in movies. But Harold hadn't wanted that. He'd always hated the smell of oil, hated the way it clung to your skin and got into your nails. Said it made him feel blue collar, like the kind of man he was trying not to become. So the Mustang waited, patient and undriven, in the shadows. Until Sophie found it. "Grandpa," she asked, pushing her curls out of her face, "what's under there?" Gregory pulled the tarp back with a dramatic flourish, revealing the gleaming lines of the hood. Even then, though it hadn't been started in years, it looked proud. Regal. "That's a dream on wheels, sweetheart," he said with a wink. Sophie gasped. "Is it yours?" "It's yours now," he said with a chuckle. "You want to learn how to fix it?" And she did. Every day of that summer, Sophie would rise at 7, pull on the same pair of grease-stained jeans and a faded Wonder Woman t-shirt, and run barefoot to the garage before breakfast. Gregory taught her everything. How to change spark plugs. How to check oil. How to identify the sound of an engine that's about to throw a fit, as he'd say. She took it all in, eyes sharp, mind bright. Once I came out with lemonade and caught them both lying on the floor under the car, side by side, arms reaching into the same tangle of wires and belts. "She's got a better ear than I ever did," Gregory told me later. "Knows when something's off just by listening. That car's got a heartbeat, and she hears it." That summer, she started calling the car Ruby. "Because she's red and beautiful and special," she told me, hugging my waist. "When I get married, Grandma, I want to drive away in Ruby. Like in the movies, you know? With cans tied to the back." I kissed her hair and said, "You will, my love. You absolutely will." And I meant it. When Gregory died 3 years later, Sophie stopped coming to the garage. She got quieter, less open, more distant. I assumed it was grief. And then Klaus happened. Suddenly, my bright-eyed, grease-loving granddaughter was going to art school in Milan, wearing high heels to dinner and laughing at jokes that sounded rehearsed. The garage went silent again. But I kept Ruby running. Every month, I started the engine, checked the oil, Drove it around the block once, just to keep her warm. I'd polished the dashboard on Christmas Eve, just to feel like Gregory was there with me. I never told Sophie. Part of me thought she'd come back for it. That one day, she'd walk through that side door, smell the gasoline and pine from Gregory's old tool rack, and say, "Grandma, is Ruby still here?" But she never did. Until yesterday, when Harold called and said I wasn't invited to her wedding. Not even a text from Sophie. No message. No explanation. They didn't want me at the wedding. Fine. I wouldn't force my presence into a space I wasn't welcome. But I would remind her of who she used to be. I walked into the garage slowly that morning, my breath catching as I reached for the tarp. I pulled it back carefully, my hands trembling slightly as the sunlight revealed the same sleek curves, the same wide, gentle headlights that had watched over us like eyes. Ruby. She was still beautiful. Still ready. I slid into the driver's seat and ran my hand along the steering wheel. The key turned easily. The engine roared to life with a deep, throaty growl that made my chest ache. Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Instead, I opened the glove compartment and pulled out the envelope I'd tucked there nearly 2 years ago. The title. Sophie's name was already printed on it. I'd gone to the DMV on her 21st birthday, filled out every form, paid every fee. I'd told myself I'd give it to her when the time was right, but the time had never come. Or maybe I'd been waiting for her to remember who she was, who she'd once been with me. Now I didn't care if she remembered. I would remind her. I slipped the title back into the envelope, added a small note in my best handwriting for the girl who loved engines more than diamonds. Drive away like you always dreamed. With love, Grandma Bella. Then I went inside, made a cup of tea, and sat back in Gregory's chair. The wedding was in 4 days. And I had a delivery to make. For 3 hours after breakfast, I sat at the kitchen table with the title to the Mustang in front of me, the envelope still sealed, my fingers tracing its edges like the ridges of a memory I wasn't sure I was ready to let go of. I kept imagining Sophie, my Sophie, stepping into the garage as she once did, eyes lighting up like a child seeing magic for the first time. But that Sophie wasn't here anymore. That Sophie hadn't even called me. Still, some part of me believed she'd remember. I folded the envelope gently and tucked it back into a drawer. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called Luke Dawson. Luke had been a part of our family in ways even family never managed. He and Gregory were inseparable from the moment they met as teenagers, raised together in garages and football fields, in late-night card games and half-built treehouses. When Gregory died, Luke came to the house every week for months. At first, to help. Then, just to sit. But as time passed, we both retreated into our grief, the silence between us filled with things we couldn't say. When he answered the phone, his voice was hoarse and low, like gravel over warm earth. "Well, if it isn't the ghost of Bella Matthews. You calling to tell me I finally won the lottery?" I said with a half laugh, my throat tightening. "I'm calling in a favor." "Name it." "It's Ruby," I said. "I want to get her ready." There was a pause long enough for me to hear the rustle of his arm brushing against fabric as he sat down, the old couch probably creaking under him the same way it always had. "Sophie's car," he said. "I remember. God, she used to sleep in the back seat like it was a cradle." "She's getting married," I said. Another pause. "And you want the car ready for the wedding?" he asked slowly. "I'm not invited." Luke let out a breath that was half sigh, half growl. "That boy of yours still hasn't grown up, has he?" "I don't want to talk about Harold," I said. "I want to talk about fixing Ruby." He didn't hesitate. "I'll be there in 2 hours. And I'm bringing my good wrench." When I opened the garage door and saw him standing there with his hands shoved into the pockets of that same tattered flannel jacket I remembered from cookouts and camping trips, I nearly broke. "Still smells like Gregory in here," he said, stepping in and taking a long breath. "Motor oil and cedar." "Helped me keep him close," I replied. He didn't say anything, just looked at me with eyes that understood more than words could carry. Then he turned to Ruby and whistled. "She's still a beauty," he murmured, walking around the car slowly, reverently. "God, I remember when Greg picked her up. He called me from the seller's house and said, "She's rusted, half dead, and she smells like mouse piss, but I'm in love." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in days. "I want her perfect," I said. "I want Sophie to see what she meant to him, to me, even if she doesn't see it now." Luke nodded, his jaw tightening. "Then let's bring her back." Over the next 3 days, the garage came alive again. We worked from morning until the late hours, the radio set to Gregory's favorite classic rock station, the sound of laughter mixing with the clinks of tools, and the occasional shouted curse when a bolt refused to budge. I'd forgotten what it felt like to create something, not just maintain or clean or mend, but really build. To bring something old and tired and loved back to life. Luke was all business under the hood. He replaced the spark plugs, flushed the transmission, and cleaned the air filter until it gleamed. Meanwhile, I restored the interior. The seats were stiff with disuse, the dashboard dusty and faded. I scrubbed every surface with a toothbrush, lined the trim with polish, and tucked a small sachet of lavender into the glove compartment, just as Gregory used to do before a long drive. At one point, I paused with my hands in my lap, watching Luke work, his hands blackened with grease, his forehead damp with sweat. He looked up and caught me staring. "What?" he asked with a crooked grin. "Nothing," I said. This feels like the closest I've come to Gregory in years." Luke nodded, his smile softening. "He's here. In every bolt, every gear." That night, over grilled cheese sandwiches and too much whiskey, Luke finally asked the question he'd been avoiding. "You really think she'll care?" he said, his voice low, eyes fixed on the glowing coil of the space heater in the garage. I looked down at my sandwich, untouched. "I don't know. I'm not sure I care." He raised an eyebrow. "I mean, I care about her. I'll always care," I clarified. "But this isn't about her recognizing me. Or thanking me. This is about doing the thing that's right. The thing Gregory would have done." Luke didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "You've always had more grace than the rest of us combined, fella." "I don't feel graceful," I said, smiling faintly. "I feel exhausted." "You've earned that." By the third day, Ruby purred like a lioness in sunlight. We took her for a test drive at sunset, the convertible top down, the wind cutting through the warm evening air like a sigh of relief. I let my fingers trail along the edge of the passenger door, watching the trees blur past, feeling something long asleep in me stir awake. "She's perfect," I said. Luke nodded. "She always was." When we pulled back into the driveway, I turned off the engine and just sat there for a moment, listening to the silence. "I'm going to deliver her tomorrow," I said. "I'll leave the car at the venue. With the title. With a note." Luke's brow furrowed. "Are you sure? What if they send it back?" I looked at him, my voice steady. "Then I'll know." He said nothing, just reached over and took my hand, held it for a moment in the fading light. "You're a better woman than I am a man," he said. I smiled. "That's not a hard bar, Luke." We laughed. And tomorrow I would make my move. The kind of move only a forgotten woman could make. A quiet, elegant strike of memory and meaning. And maybe, just maybe, when Sophie saw that red Mustang waiting for her in the wedding driveway, with a ribbon on the hood and a title in her name, she'd remember the girl who once slept in the back seat and dreamed about driving into her future. And she'd remember who gave her the keys. I didn't sleep the night before the wedding. My body was exhausted, aching from 3 days of scrubbing and polishing and wrench passing, but my mind ran laps in the dark. I lay in bed listening to the old house creak, the wind whistling against the eaves, the tick of the mantel clock that Gregory had wound every Sunday for 35 years. It hadn't missed a beat since the day he died. It was more reliable than most of my family. At 5:12 a.m., I gave up trying to rest. I wrapped myself in Gregory's old robe, the navy blue one with the fraying collar, and padded into the kitchen barefoot. As I filled the kettle, my eyes caught the small porcelain dish on the counter, the one where I kept my keys and loose change. Tucked beneath the ring of a faded parking token was the envelope. The title, Sophie's name printed in black ink, crisp and undeniable. I had written the note the night before in my best handwriting, the kind I used to save for birthday cards and cake labels. For Sophie, who once believed in horsepower and dreams. From the woman who still believes in you. Drive toward the life you want. With love always, Grandma Bella. I folded the note and slipped it back inside the envelope. But as I looked at the car parked in the driveway, gleaming under a soft layer of dew, I knew it wasn't enough. Ruby was ready, beautiful, alive again. But something was missing. At 8:45 a.m., I stood in front of the small glass display case at Stone's Jewelry and Pawn. It wasn't the fanciest shop in town, but it was the kind of place that dealt in stories disguised as heirlooms. Behind the counter stood Marla Stone, a third-generation pawnbroker who knew half the town's secrets and kept them locked tighter than her safe. She looked up and smiled gently. Bella Matthews. Now there's a face I haven't seen in too long. I smiled faintly, already unfastening the clasp at the back of my neck. I need to sell something. Marla's expression softened when she saw the necklace. My God, she murmured, reaching forward reverently. Is this? I nodded. The pearl necklace. Gregory gave it to me on our 10th anniversary. He couldn't afford it then. We were still paying off Harold's braces and a leaky roof, but he had picked it out 6 months before, made monthly payments behind my back, and surprised me with it over dinner at Russo's Italian bistro. I still remembered the way his hands trembled as he fastened it around my neck. You're worth every pearl in the ocean, he had whispered. And I believed him. Marla lifted the necklace with gloved fingers, studying the luster. Bella, I don't want to insult you with an offer. I'm not looking for sentiment, I said, my voice steady. I need cash. Now. She studied me for a long moment, then disappeared into the back room. When she returned, she laid a check on the counter. $6,000. It's worth more, but this is what I can offer today. No questions, no delay. I nodded. That's more than fair. She hesitated. You sure? I've never been sure. As I walked out of the shop, I didn't feel sadness. I felt freedom. I drove straight to the florist and placed a rush order on the most extravagant bouquet they could manage. Gardenias, peonies, ivory roses, Sophie's favorites, even if she'd forgotten telling me. I bought a silver charm with the engraving Drive Forward. I had it attached to a red ribbon and tied it to the keyring. Then, with the last of the money, I hired a local violinist to wait by the gates of the wedding venue and play Clair de Lune, the piece Gregory used to hum while working under Ruby's hood. The piece Sophie once danced to in the garage, barefoot on concrete, spinning in circles while oil-stained and giggling. I left instructions with the delivery man. Wait until the ceremony begins. Then drive the car up the main driveway. Stop in front of the venue's entrance and leave the keys and bouquet on the front seat. Say nothing. Just hand this note to Sophie. I paid in full. No receipts. No names. The man looked at me like I was sending a message from beyond the grave. In a way, I was. That night, I returned home and poured myself a glass of red wine. I stood by the window watching the dark curl around my garden, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something unexpected settle inside me. Peace. I had no illusions. Sophie might reject it. Harold might call and scream. Klaus might send the car back with a bow wrapped in disdain. But I had done what I came to do. I had given my granddaughter her dream. And if she still couldn't see me, not as an inconvenience or a relic, but as the woman who carried her across stormy years with love and grease under her nails, then that was her burden to carry, not mine. Because today, I gave her the only wedding gift that mattered. The keys to her past. And the ignition to her future. I woke just after 6 a.m., not from a nightmare, not from loneliness, but from something far more surprising, contentment. It lay lightly across my chest, unfamiliar as a new perfume. Not loud, not triumphant, but steady, present. I hadn't felt that way in years. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that once made me feel like a ghost haunting my own life. But now it felt different, like possibility, like breath. I made tea and sat on the back porch, still wearing Gregory's old robe, and listened to the birds sing the morning awake. I could almost feel him next to me, his hand curled around his favorite mug, legs stretched out, humming some forgotten Sinatra tune. I did it, Greg, I whispered, watching the steam rise. I gave her the car. I gave her Ruby. The moment hung there in the cool air. I didn't know if Sophie had driven away in Ruby or even touched the keys. But it didn't matter, because for the first time in years, I had done something just for me. That sense of lightness stayed with me all day. I showered, put on a sundress I hadn't worn in ages, soft lavender with a pattern of tiny white flowers, and dabbed on a bit of Gregory's favorite perfume. He used to call it summer in a bottle. Then I went out. To the library first, where I signed up for a community writing course. The young woman at the desk looked surprised, maybe even a little skeptical. But I met her gaze with a smile and said, "It's never too late to tell a story." After that, I wandered into the small bookstore downtown, the one with crooked shelves and mismatched chairs, and ended up chatting with the owner for nearly an hour about classic literature and whether or not the world still needed poetry. He said it didn't. I said it always had. Then I did something I hadn't done in at least a decade. I called my friends, not texted, not commented on their social media posts with a heart emoji. I called them one by one. Esther cried when she heard my voice. "Bella? Oh my God, it's really you." "I'm still alive," I said with a smile. "No kidding," she laughed. "We thought you'd join some monastery for bitter grandmothers." I laughed too. It felt good. Like unclenching a part of myself I didn't realize had been tight for years. She invited me to book club. "We're reading some spicy romance this month," she warned. "You might blush. Maybe that's exactly what I need." By the time I returned home, my legs were tired, but my spirit buzzed like it used to after a night shift at the hospital. There was something beautiful about purposeful exhaustion. It reminded me of the woman I had been before widowhood, before retirement, before I became Grandma Bella and nothing else. I stood in my kitchen, watching the late afternoon light filter through the lace curtains, and felt it again, the spark. Not a fire, not a blaze, just a spark, but enough. 2 days later, I met Clara for lunch at the cafe near the florist. She was the kind of friend who always wore lipstick, even on laundry days, and her bracelets clinked when she gestured. She talked fast, laughed louder, and had a heart the size of Minnesota. We were halfway through our salads when she leaned in, lowered her voice, and said, "Bella, I didn't want to bring it up, but have you heard about the wedding?" I froze mid-bite. "What about it?" She glanced around, then whispered, "Klaus's parents. Total snobs. Worse than I ever imagined." I blinked. What happened? "They came into the bridal shop last week, before the wedding, for Sophie's final fitting. You know how most parents are teary-eyed, proud, maybe a little controlling." She rolled her eyes. These two were military-grade tyrants. Tyrants? They made Sophie change her veil 3 times because it clashed with their custom French-imported floral arrangements. The poor girl stood there in her slip, shivering, while Klaus's mother criticized her neckline and said she hoped the dress photographed better than it looked in person. My hands curled into fists on the table. "And Klaus?" I asked. "Silent," Clara said bitterly. Just stared at his phone while his mother picked Sophie apart. I felt the heat rise up my neck. She didn't even fight back, Clara added. Just nodded. She looked, not scared exactly, but sad. Like she wasn't even in her own skin. I sat back, the breath knocked out of me. I remembered the Sophie who climbed trees in a tutu, who refused to eat anything green, who once punched a boy in 2nd grade for calling her a nerd because she liked engines. And now she couldn't defend her own veil? Clara reached across the table and touched my hand gently. "Bella, I don't know what's going on in that marriage, but something's off." She didn't look like a bride in love. She looked like someone walking into a job interview she didn't want. That night, I sat on my porch again, wrapped in Gregory's robe, the sky glowing dusky orange above me. "She's not the same," I said into the air. And I swore I felt Gregory in the rustle of the wind. "Neither are you," it seemed to whisper. And that was true. I had changed. Not because they forced me to, but because I finally remembered that I was more than the roles they gave me. I wasn't just Grandma Bella, the backup babysitter, the wallet, the name on the check. I was Bella Matthews. Nurse, wife, mother, fighter, dreamer, woman. And though the world had tried to forget me, I had not forgotten myself. I picked up my knitting, pulled the unraveling scarf into my lap, and began again. This time with purpose. This time for me. It was supposed to be a simple errand. My knees had been acting up again, too many hours crouched in the garage, probably, and I'd run out of the balm I keep by my bedside. The pharmacy was half a mile away, and the walk did me good most days. It helped me feel part of the world again. People in line for prescriptions, teenagers raiding the candy aisle, a mother soothing a crying baby by the checkout. Life went on, even when yours felt paused. The automatic doors sighed open, and I made my way to the aisle where they kept the arthritis creams. I was mealing, not gracefully, examining expiration dates when I heard it. Mrs. Matthews? That voice. Low. Hesitant. Male. I froze. I turned my head slowly, still crouched, expecting perhaps an old patient or a former colleague. But there he was. Klaus. Of all the people. For a moment, I didn't move. I studied him as if he were a stranger in a familiar suit. His shirt was wrinkled. His tie hung loosely around his neck. There were shadows under his eyes, the kind that come from too many nights staring at a ceiling instead of sleeping. In one hand, he held a small prescription bag. In the other, a bottle of extra-strength Tylenol. Klaus, I said, standing with effort. What a surprise. His eyes flicked down to the cream in my hand, then back to my face. I didn't expect to see you here. Well, I said lightly, joint pain waits for no one. He laughed, but it was thin. Nervous. We stood there, a pharmacy aisle away from the mess of our shared silence. The last time we were within speaking distance, I had been standing by a table of finger foods, trying not to roll my eyes as he regaled everyone with a story about optimizing quarterly revenue cycles. That was 6 months ago, before the uninvitation, before the wedding, before everything. I owe you, he started, then stopped. I tilted my head. You owe me? He exhaled through his nose, frustrated with himself. I owe you an apology. For a long moment, I said nothing. I just watched him, trying to see what Sophie had seen in him. Under the smug charm, the neatly parted hair, the crisp suits, was there anything real? I didn't expect that, I said honestly. I know. He hesitated, then added, Sophie told me about the car. About everything. After the wedding. That surprised me. My heart did a strange little flip. She's driven it 3 times already, he went on, his voice softer now. The night after the ceremony, she disappeared. I thought she was mad at me. Turns out, she drove to the beach. Just to think. I smiled, imagining her with her curls blowing wild in the sea breeze, the Mustang purring beneath her. Free. Untamed. Like she used to be. She said it reminded her of herself, Klaus said, and something shifted in his face. A kind of realization. Of who she was before the pressure. Before the planning. Before us. I looked him in the eye then, seeing him not as the smug fiancé, not as the man who had stood silently while his parents belittled my granddaughter, but as someone who just might, be waking up. Why are you telling me this? I asked gently. He swallowed, glanced at the rows of medicine as if hoping they'd offer an answer. Because you should know you did something good. Something important. She may not have said it, but I see it. I blinked back the sting in my eyes. She sits in the car sometimes without driving it, he added. Just sits. Like she's remembering who she is. Good, I whispered. She needs that. Klaus nodded, then stared at the bottle in his hand like it might explain the ache he couldn't voice. I thought giving her the world meant control, he said quietly. Security. Order. But I think you knew all along it meant something else. It means freedom, I said. Letting her be herself. Not trying to build a version of her you can manage. His lips twitched into a sad smile. You don't pull punches, do you? Not anymore. We stood there a moment longer, 2 people connected by love for the same woman and the pain of not knowing how to hold on to her without hurting her. He shifted his weight. I don't know what's going to happen between us. I want it to work, but I think she's figuring out who she wants to be. I nodded. Then let her. He opened his mouth to speak, but I stopped him. And don't you dare try to take credit for the car, I added with a raised brow. That gift came from blood, sweat, engine oil, and 20 years of memories. His grin broke through, genuine this time. Understood. As I turned to leave, he said one last thing. She still wears the charm. The one on the keychain. Drive forward. She looks at it like it's a compass. I nodded once, not trusting myself to speak. Outside, the sun was blinding. I slid on my sunglasses and walked slowly back toward home, the bomb tucked in my purse, my heart strange and light. I didn't know what Sophie would choose, if her marriage would last, if she'd return to herself or lose her way again. But I knew this. I had reminded her of who she was. And for now, that was enough. The message came in just after breakfast. I had been sitting at the kitchen table with a crossword puzzle, half-heartedly circling clues, when my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Esther. Bella, honey, call me the second you get this. It's about Sophie. And the wedding. Well, just call me. Please. The last word struck like a pin to the chest. Esther never pleaded. She was a woman who once stood on her porch during a tornado warning, arms crossed, daring the wind to touch her begonias. I dialed her number with shaking fingers. It rang once. Bella. Finally, she gasped, breathless. You're sitting down? I am now, I said, easing into Gregory's old chair. The wedding's been moved up. My heart skipped. What? It's happening this Saturday. I blinked, disoriented. But that's 3 days from now. 3. Exactly, Esther said. It was supposed to be next month, right? The vineyard, the big event, everything. Gone. Apparently now it's a private ceremony at some estate out by the lake. Smaller guest list. Very hush-hush. I rubbed my temples. What are they calling it? A family advance celebration. Some ridiculous phrase Klaus's mother made up, no doubt. Of course. Klaus's mother. I don't get it, I said. Why move it up? Why change everything? That's where it gets complicated, Esther said, lowering her voice. I've talked to people who've seen things. Something's off. Off how? She's not herself, Bella. I froze. She was in the boutique 3 days ago for a final fitting. Melissa, remember Melissa? She works there now. She told me Sophie looked pale, almost sick, barely speaking. Melissa tried to joke with her, asked if she was nervous about the honeymoon. Sophie just smiled like someone told her to. Not a real smile. I could see it so clearly. The quiet surrender. The girl who used to wear oil-stained jeans now being turned into a porcelain bride. Esther went on, and get this, when he showed her the new dress, the one her mother-in-law insisted on, Sophie just nodded. Didn't even protest. Melissa said she looked like she was being led to a gallows. A cold chill ran through me. She didn't want to change the dress? She loved the first one, Esther said. The one she picked. It had this embroidered hem, like wildflowers. Feminine, but strong. Not the cookie-cutter stuff. And the venue? Changed to somewhere her family doesn't even know. Apparently the vineyard wasn't ideal for Klaus's parents' guests. Can you imagine? Yes. Sadly, I could. I stood up, my blood running faster now. And there's more, Esther said. Someone saw her outside a cafe yesterday. Alone. After a lunch meeting with Klaus's mother. Sophie came out shaking. Eyes red. No makeup. Looked like she'd been crying. She didn't say goodbye to anyone. Just walked straight to the parking lot and drove off. To where? No one knows. But I did. I knew exactly where she went. I hung up the phone and stood in the center of the living room, the air thick with the ghosts of choices I never made. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, mercilessly. 3 days. That was all the time I had left. 3 days to find her. To reach her. To remind her who she is before they turned her into a marionette in a wedding gown she didn't choose. I moved into the garage like someone waking from a dream. Ruby sat there, bathed in the soft shadows of morning. Her chrome shined like moonlight. The red paint seemed almost defiant, as if she, too, understood what was at stake. I ran my hand along the hood. She came to you, I whispered. You knew, didn't you? I slid into the driver's seat. It still smelled like lemon oil and old leather and something faintly floral, lavender sachets, just like I used to tuck under the seats. I rested my hands on the wheel and closed my eyes. Gregory, I thought. I need your calm. I need your clarity. And I need your strength. The keys felt heavy in my hand. Like a promise. I started the engine. The Mustang came alive with a low, warm growl. The kind of sound that doesn't ask for permission. It just is. I didn't know where Sophie was exactly, but I knew where she felt safe. And I'd find her. Because this wedding may have been moved, rearranged, rewritten, but the girl beneath all the silk and expectations was still my granddaughter. She may have been quiet, compliant, but I knew that deep down, something inside her still roared. I just had to remind her. There's a certain kind of stillness that only comes after a storm you didn't see coming. The house was quiet, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. I sat at the kitchen table, the sunlight stretched long across the floor, touching the tips of my slippers. Outside, the world moved on, cars humming down the street, a child's laughter ringing faintly from a few doors down, but inside, time moved slower, like syrup poured in winter. I had driven the Mustang again that morning, just around the block, as if by circling familiar roads I could somehow prepare myself for what I knew I had to face. Not Sophie, but myself. Because if I wanted to give her peace, I had to first come to terms with what I'd done. Not what they had done Klaus, Harold, his cold wife, that awful family of porcelain smiles and iron rules, but what I had done. Christmas. That wretched evening. I could still hear the tinkle of silverware, the low murmur of a Nat King Cole album playing in the background, the flicker of candlelight casting soft shadows across the roast. Everything looked perfect, smelled perfect. But underneath, we were teetering. I remember the moment it started unraveling. Sophie was cutting herself a slice of pie, and Klaus reached over, barely touched her wrist, and said, "That's enough, isn't it, babe?" It was a joke. A small, ugly little joke. And Sophie laughed. Polite. Quiet. But something in me snapped. It wasn't the first time I'd seen him do it. Subtle corrections, jokes with sharp edges, that smug, managerial tone, but it was the first time I saw her flinch and try to hide it. And I couldn't take it. "You're not on a diet, are you?" I asked, my voice sharp like broken glass. Everyone froze. Klaus gave that smug chuckle. "Oh, come on. It's just pie, Bella." I was kidding. But why say it? I pressed. Why point it out? Why not just let her eat what she wants without turning it into a negotiation? Harold cleared his throat. "Mom, maybe now's not that I kept going. She used to eat 3 slices of that pie and still have room for cocoa. Remember that, Sophie? You were a tornado of sugar and joy." Sophie stared at her plate. "I think," Klaus said coolly, "that maybe you're reading too much into things." I turned to Sophie. "Am I?" Her eyes met mine. Wide. Wet. "Grandma," she whispered. "Please." But it wasn't a plea for support. It was a plea for silence. And I failed her. Because I didn't stop. "I'm just worried you're losing yourself in this relationship. In all these rules and changes. You're not you anymore." She stood up then. Quietly. No yelling. No theatrics. Just silence. She walked out of the dining room and didn't come back. And that was the last Christmas I saw her smile. I hadn't apologized. Not really. I'd sent a message a week later, clumsy, too long, full of justifications, but she never responded. And maybe I thought I was being brave, speaking up for her. Maybe I thought I was protecting her. But I see it differently now. I see it for what it was, fear. My own. Fear of losing her. Fear of watching her light go dim. Fear that all the years we spent building memories, baking cookies, fixing cars, laughing in the garage, were being overwritten by a man who thought control was love. But even fear, when weaponized, becomes cruelty. And my words, that night, had been more knife than net. I sat now at the table with a blank no card in front of me, my pen trembling. How do you apologize for drowning someone in your own grief? How do you say, "I'm sorry," without expecting to be forgiven? Slowly, I began to write, "Sophie, that Christmas, I made a mistake. I thought I was being protective. I thought I was saving you from something. But I wasn't saving you. I was hurting you. I let my fear speak louder than my love. I should have trusted you to know your own heart. I should have listened. I should have seen. But instead, I pushed. And for that, I am deeply sorry. I can't undo that night. I can't erase the words. But what I can do is show you through action, not apology, that my love for you has no conditions, no strings, no agenda, just one wish, that you live fully, that you never forget who you are, that you drive forward. I gave you Ruby not to win you back, but to remind you of your own strength. And I will always, always be proud of you. Love, Grandma Bella. I folded the note slowly, tears falling silently onto the paper. Then I walked into the garage, opened the Mustang's glove box, and slid the letter inside, next to the title, next to the key with a charm that said, "Drive forward." And this time, I didn't slam the door. I closed it gently. Because some messages don't need shouting. They just need presence. The morning of the wedding dawned with a quiet melancholy, as if the world itself was unsure whether it wanted to celebrate or weep. A pale sun hung behind gauzy clouds, casting everything in a faint silver hue. The kind of light that made memories feel closer, as though Gregory could have stepped through the kitchen door at any moment, mug in hand, asking if I'd seen his keys. I hadn't slept much. My mind had paced all night, revisiting every word in the letter I'd left in Ruby's glove compartment, second-guessing the bouquet I'd chosen, wondering if it would all fall flat. If Sophie would see the car and feel nothing. If the note would go unread. If she had already drifted too far. But the decision was made. This wasn't about closure anymore. It was about presence. I dressed simply navy wool coat, low heels, a pearl brooch from my wedding day. My hands trembled as I tied the ribbon around the bouquet one last time, lavender and daisies freshly cut that morning from my neighbor's garden, with permission, of course, though I think Carol would have forgiven me even if I hadn't asked. The Mustang was ready. Ruby gleamed in the driveway like a proud sentinel, her coat of cherry red polish to a mirror shine. The bouquet rested gently on the passenger seat, the ribbon trailing like a whisper. The envelope was tucked safely in the glove box, right where it belonged. I took one last breath and started the engine. The hum beneath me wasn't just mechanical. It was emotional, alive, as though Ruby herself knew she was part of something more than a delivery. She was carrying decades of love, a lineage of dreams, and one final bridge between a girl and the grandmother who had always believed in her. The hotel was impossibly grand, one of those modern estates with oversized glass windows and manicured hedges, so precise they looked artificial. Klaus's family had rented the entire property. Black luxury cars lined the driveway like soldiers at attention. A valet stood near the circular drop-off, clipboard in hand, glancing between guests and vehicles as if each was a potential security threat. I didn't approach the front. Instead, I took a detour down a quiet side path, one the gardeners used, and parked at the edge of a gravel service road near the back lawn. I'd planned to leave the car in front just before the ceremony, but I arrived early. Too early. I sat in the car with the engine idling, watching the mist over the lake rise like a curtain. And that's when I saw her. A blur of white stepping out of a side door, barefoot, veil in hand, her dress bunched at the knees to keep it from dragging. Sophie. She looked like a ghost at first. Or maybe an angel. The lines of her gown were soft and flowing, not the stiff, structured couture I'd imagined. Her hair was half up, loose curls framing her face. She looked less like a bride and more like the girl I remembered, dreamy and wild, beautiful and lost. She hadn't seen me. Not yet. She was staring at the horizon, chewing on her lip the way she used to do when she was trying not to cry. Then her eyes shifted. Her gaze landed on the Mustang. And on me. We locked eyes through the windshield, two women separated by miles of silence, years of unspoken words, and one long, aching winter. Her face crumbled. She ran, barefoot, down the gravel road, her dress sweeping behind her like wings, the veil forgotten in her hand. I opened the car door just as she reached me, and then she was in my arms. "Grandma," she gasped, her voice already thick with tears. "Oh my God, it's really you. You came." I held her tight. "You saw Ruby." "I knew it was you," she sobbed. "The second I saw the hood." I can't believe you came." I felt her shaking. From emotion. from everything she'd held in. I wasn't going to, I said softly. I didn't think I should. I just wanted to give you something. Something that mattered. She pulled back, her mascara running, her hands gripping my sleeves like she was afraid I'd vanish. You did. You gave me the only thing that reminded me of who I am. Who I was before all this. She glanced back at the hotel. Everything feels like it's been designed for someone else. My dress, the schedule, the guest list, the food. But this, she motioned to the car, this is me. You remembered. I never forgot, I said, brushing hair from her face. And I'm sorry. For Christmas. For all of it. I came in too loud when you needed quiet. I wanted to protect you, but I forgot that you have your own strength. She shook her head. No, you were right. I was losing myself, and I didn't know how to say it. Then don't say it, I said gently. Show it. She laughed through her tears. Like you did. Exactly. She looked at the bouquet on the seat, then at the key in the ignition. I want you at the wedding. Sophie, no, she said firmly. You're my family. You're not just some guest. You're home, and I want you there. Please. I hesitated. My chest swelled with so many feelings I couldn't name. Then I nodded. All right. She smiled. And Grandma? Yes, sweetheart. I think I'm going to drive Ruby down the aisle. That made me laugh. Really laugh. She'll be honored. And so would Gregory. That afternoon, under a wide open sky by the lake, Sophie didn't walk. She drove. The guests gasped as the red Mustang rolled slowly down the makeshift aisle, her veil tucked carefully into the front seat, her bouquet resting beside her. She stepped out barefoot, radiant, unafraid. And I watched from the front row, tears slipping freely down my cheeks. Not because she looked beautiful, but because, for the first time in months, she looked free. And I knew then, reconciliation doesn't always come with a perfect apology or a single moment. Sometimes it begins with an engine's hum, and a grandmother who stayed. The lake reflected the first hints of twilight like a sheet of polished glass, lavender and gold streaking across its surface. The air had that peculiar stillness of a summer evening about to turn, holding its breath for what came next. Guests buzzed around the reception tent, servers balancing trays of sparkling wine, cousins snapping photos, toddlers darting between tables. Laughter rose and fell like waves against the dock. And there I stood, just outside the tent's edge, waiting. I had accepted Sophie's invitation. She'd taken my hand and told me I belonged, that she wanted me there, not as a guest, not as a last-minute act of grace, but as family, real and whole. Still, I hesitated. There had been too many closed doors, too many unsaid things, too much time spent on opposite shores. Could one gesture, one glorious drive down a wedding aisle, really rebuild all that? And then I saw her. Sophie stood beneath the glowing archway, barefoot in her wildflower gown, sipping from a glass of lemonade with a daisy tucked behind one ear. She was surrounded by people, yet her eyes found mine instantly, as if she had been looking all along. She smiled, not just a polite smile or a grateful one, but a smile that said, I remember everything, and I forgive you. It was all I needed. I stepped into the tent. The murmur started almost immediately. Not unkind, just surprised. Guests whispered softly, eyes darting toward me, then back to one another. The woman who'd been disinvited had arrived. And not only arrived, but had ushered the bride to her own wedding in a fire-red Mustang, like something out of a 1960s movie poster. Let them whisper. Let them wonder. Because Sophie had already spoken. And Klaus's parents, well, they were a harder audience. They stood near the head table, dressed like elegance personified. His mother wore navy silk, her hair as sharp as her posture. His father was the picture of stately charm, a whiskey glass in one hand, his eyes scanning the room like he was conducting a stockholders' meeting. Then they noticed me. At first, there was a flicker of surprise. Then, something else, curiosity maybe. Klaus leaned in and spoke to them in hushed tones. His mother frowned, listening. His father nodded slowly. And then, like a diplomatic summit between former enemies, they approached. Ms. Matthews, his father said, extending a hand. I wanted to thank you for your generous gift to Sophie. That car, it's extraordinary." I shook his hand. She always said she'd drive it to her wedding. His lips corked into the smallest of smiles. And she did. His wife stood stiffly at his side. She didn't speak at first, just looked at me closely, like a jeweler inspecting a stone. Then she said I didn't understand before. Why that car mattered. Why Sophie was so adamant. "And now?" I asked. She glanced toward the dance floor, where Sophie was laughing with a friend, the charm bracelet on her wrist catching the light with every gesture. "She looks like herself again," she said. For a while, I wasn't sure who she was becoming. I could have said many things. That control is not love. That silencing someone's joy doesn't protect them. But I didn't. Not now. Sometimes I said instead, all a girl needs is one person to remind her. Klaus joined us then, a bit breathless from shaking hands and posing for photos. He looked more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. "I'm glad you're here, Bella," he said. "I know things didn't start out right, but I want them to end better." I nodded. "Then treat her right." "I plan to," he said. "But if I don't, something tells me that car might show up in the driveway again, with you behind the wheel." We both laughed, and something loosened between us. Later, under a canopy of stars and strung lights, the music shifted. The first slow dance was over, the couple swaying gently around the floor. And then, from behind me, came a familiar voice. "Mom?" Harold. He stood with his hand extended, tie loosened, his eyes soft and full of something unspoken. "I've been a fool," he said. "I let them push you out. I didn't defend you. I didn't know how to stand in the middle without falling over." I looked at him. My boy, my only child, the one I had nursed through fevers, defended at school, taught how to make pancakes with too much syrup. And here he was. "May I have this dance?" he asked. I placed my hand in his, and he led me gently to the floor. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. The song was soft, an old tune I used to hum in the kitchen while he did homework. And as we moved, people stepped aside, creating a small, respectful circle. I saw Sophie watching from her seat, her eyes shining. I saw Klaus's mother lift her glass in my direction. And I saw Gregory, not in flesh, but in memory at every step, in every note. As if he were standing on the edge of the dance floor, arms crossed, nodding with approval. As the song ended, Harold leaned down and whispered, "You did it, Mom. You never gave up." And I whispered back, neither did she. The night ended with cake and sparklers, with laughter and music, with stories traded like heirlooms. Ruby sat at the edge of the lawn, glowing beneath the moonlight like a guardian angel on wheels. And I sat with my granddaughter beneath the stars, our hands clasped tight, watching the lights flicker in the lake's reflection. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a beginning. The beginning of a new era, where the past was acknowledged, the wounds were healing, and love at long last had found its voice again. Ruby's tires had barely cooled from the wedding drive before she was off again, this time not with me behind the wheel, but with Sophie and Klaus, the new travelers in our family story. She texted me the night before they left, "We're heading north first. I want to see the redwoods before I'm too old to climb one." Klaus says I'm being dramatic. He's wrong, obviously. I'll send photos. And send them she did. Every few days, without fail, my phone would buzz with an image and a caption that read like a journal entry scrawled across the miles. A snapshot of Ruby parked beneath a mammoth tree trunk wider than a cottage, Sophie perched on the hood, grinning barefoot in overalls. Day 4. Klaus tried to make campfire chili. We're still recovering. Another of them at a gas station in Utah, Klaus holding up a road map like a clueless tourist, and Sophie behind the wheel, her feet on the dash, sunglasses crooked on her face, tongue sticking out. Day 9. He got us lost. I'm not mad. He brought me apple pie. With every image, every mile, something in me softened. I hadn't just given her a car. I'd given her the road back to herself. And maybe even the path forward to something neither of us had imagined. Back at home, things moved slowly, but for the first time in years, the slowness felt full, not empty. Harold started dropping by more often. He'd linger on the porch, pretending he was just passing through on his way back from work, but I knew better. One afternoon, he brought a broken toaster and asked if I could take a look. I raised an eyebrow. "You brought me a toaster." "Well," he shrugged, rubbing the back of his neck, "you always liked fixing things." I laughed. "Your daughter's marriage doesn't mean I've opened a repair shop, Harold." He flushed, but stayed for tea. That became our ritual, me fixing imaginary problems, him fixing something a little more real between us. He even cried once. He told me he regretted the phone call about the wedding, that he'd let his wife and Klaus's family do the deciding, that he hadn't been strong enough to say no. "My mother deserves to be there." "I was trying to keep the peace," he said. "And you lost it instead," I replied gently. He nodded, eyes glassy. "But I want it back now, if you'll let me try." I reached across the table and took his hand. "We all fail each other sometimes," I said. "It's what we do after that counts." Klaus's parents, too, began to thaw. It was subtle at first. His mother sent a thank you note, handwritten, on real stationery. Inside, she wrote, "Your granddaughter's eyes sparkled the moment she pulled up to that aisle." I now understand that some gifts aren't just things. They're mirrors. A few weeks later, she called me directly, invited me for lunch. We sat on her pristine patio eating 2 delicate sandwiches, and for once, she didn't correct my grammar or speak in rehearsed platitudes. She asked questions. About me, about Gregory, about Sophie as a child. "I always thought structure was the safest path to happiness," she confessed. "But maybe freedom is safer than I thought." I nodded. "Sometimes it's the only way back to yourself." We parted with a hug. Not stiff, not symbolic, but warm, real. And then came the Wednesday that changed everything. The sky was overcast. Rain gently ticked against the windows, and I was crocheting in the living room, lavender yarn, the beginnings of a baby blanket I hadn't told anyone I was making, not even myself. I don't know why I started it. Maybe I hoped. Maybe I just needed to believe in a future with softer arms and smaller fingers. And then my phone buzzed. A photo. Sophie, standing in front of a neon motel sign. Her hair wet from rain, mascara slightly smudged, both hands over her mouth. In her left hand, a white stick, faint pink lines across the screen. The caption read, "It's real. We're having a baby." I didn't know who to tell first, but I knew it had to be you. I gasped, hand over my mouth, yarn falling from my lap. I whispered her name like a prayer. Sophie, a baby, a new heartbeat in the family line, a continuation of all our stubbornness and spirit, our laughter and pain, our long roads and quiet kitchens. And I, Bella Matthews, was going to be a great-grandmother. I looked toward the mantel where Gregory's photo sat. I smiled through the tears. "You old romantic," I said aloud. Can you believe it? Now every day holds a rhythm. A drive to the market. A phone call from Harold. Photos from the road, Klaus building a crib in the back of the Mustang. Sophie in a thrift store holding up a tiny denim jacket. Her belly growing rounder in each new picture. The neighbors ask me questions. "Didn't you fix up that car? Are they still out there, those 2 lovebirds? Is it true you're teaching girls to change oil on Saturdays?" I nod. Smile. Yes, they're out there. And so am I. Not just surviving, but living. Crocheting joy into blankets. Teaching teens how to change a tire and change their lives. Watching my family come home to themselves, mile by mile, choice by choice. And soon, there'll be a knock on the door and a baby wrapped in lavender yarn. And I'll whisper into their tiny ear, "You come from strong people. You come from love. And there's a Mustang out back that'll be yours someday, once you learn how to drive it right." Because we don't just pass down recipes and names. We pass down courage. And I've got plenty left to give.